Okay, you know how some friendships just click? Like, they totally make sense, right? Peanut butter and jelly, that kind of thing.
Right, right.
But have you ever seen a friendship that's like peanut butter and sriracha?
Hmm, spicy.
Yeah, a little spicy. But surprisingly, it works.
Interesting.
Well, that's what we're diving into today.
Right.
A deep dive into the world of Ever After High and the totally unexpected friendship between Raven Queen and Apple White.
Whoa, hold on. Daughter of the evil queen and Snow White's heir.
You got it.
Destined to be enemies, right? Like, come on.
You'd think so. But that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
This analysis we found argues their story isn't just some fairy tale twist. It's actually packed with insights into real relationships, like ours.
You mean like stuff we can actually use?
Exactly. Stuff that can make our own friendships stronger, more meaningful, you know?
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we even start with this?
Well, the first thing that jumps out is how their personalities, they're like total opposites, right?
Yeah, black and white, literally.
But instead of clashing, those differences actually fuel their growth.
Like iron sharpens iron.
Exactly. Remember that study in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin about how different personalities and friendships can lead to big changes?
Yeah, I remember reading something about that.
It makes you wonder, though, do opposites really attract marry in friendships like they do in romance?
It's a good question. I mean, look at Raven and Apple.
Yeah.
Apple, always the goody two-shoes, the rule follower. She starts to question things thanks to Raven's influence.
And Raven.
She's hesitant about her whole villain destiny, right? But Apple's support gives her the strength to, like, chart her own path.
It's like they each give the other something they're missing,
Yeah, a different lens to see the world through.
a different perspective.
Exactly. And that leads us to another fascinating point. The whole destiny versus choice thing.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Raven, she's all about taking control of her life,
Yeah.
refusing to be defined by her family history.
Like, just because Mom tried to poison Snow White doesn't mean I have to be the next evil queen.
Ha, that's a great way to put it.
Right.
And Apple, who starts out believing her life is, like, all mapped out for her, she starts to see things differently because of Raven.
It's like they're both breaking free from those fairy tale expectations.
It challenges that whole idea that we're stuck in these predetermined roles.
Okay, but hold on. Even in fairy tale land, friendships have their, ups and downs.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What really got me was the role of forgiveness in their relationship.
Especially with their family history, right?
Yeah, it can't be easy to let go of that baggage.
And that's where the story goes deeper than just, feel-good stuff.
It gets real.
It does. The Greater Good Science Center has all this research on how forgiveness isn't just noble, it's actually linked to better mental health.
So letting go of grudges isn't just about being nice, it's actually good for you.
That's what the research suggests. It's not saying what someone did was okay, but it's about freeing yourself from carrying around all that anger and resentment.
Choosing to move on instead of letting the past define you.
Exactly. Which, Raven seems to be really good at.
Right, she's all about defying expectations.
And this leads us to another interesting layer of the relationship. The way they challenge those good girl versus rebel stereotypes we see everywhere.
Oh, all the time.
Like, it's everywhere.
It's like you're either the sweet princess or the edgy loner. No in between.
Right. But Raven and Apple, they show that women, and people in general, are way more complex than that.
They're both kind, endy assertive, traditional, and rebellious.
A much more nuanced picture of what it means to be a woman.
Or frankly, just a human being figuring things out.
Exactly.
Okay. But even with all this amazing stuff, they still have conflicts, right?
Of course. No relationship is perfect, fairy tale, or real life.
Right.
But what's interesting is how the story uses those conflicts as growth opportunities.
Instead of just like sweeping disagreements under the rug.
Exactly. They actually use those moments to learn and evolve.
Like when?
Yeah, exactly. And that ties back to what relationship expert John Gottman says about constructive conflict, right?
Oh, man.
It's not about avoiding disagreements, it's about how you handle them.
So fighting isn't necessarily bad as long as you do it right.
You got it. And the source actually gives us a really helpful tip,
Oh.
using I feel statements instead of placing blame.
So instead of you never listen, you'd say,
You'd say, I feel hurt when I don't feel heard.
That seems so simple, but I bet it changes the whole dynamic.
It does. It invites the other person to understand your perspective instead of just getting defensive.
That's powerful. And speaking of powerful, this whole idea of mirroring in friendships, it's pretty mind-blowing.
Mirroring.
Yeah. The idea that we subconsciously reflect the qualities we admire in others.
Right. So you're saying if we hang out with people who inspire us, we're more likely to embody those qualities ourselves.
That's the idea. And it makes you think about the people you surround yourself with,
Absolutely.
And in Raven and Apple's case, they help each other see their best selves. Apple sees Raven's courage and potential, while Raven shows Apple the value of questioning things, breaking the mold.
It's like a positive feedback loop, pushing each other to grow.
And ultimately, it seems like their friendship is about much more than just getting along.
It's about courage.
Yeah, the courage to defy expectations, to choose love over fear, to make your own choices.
Exactly. And that message, it goes way beyond Ever After High.
It's about realizing that we all have the power to shape our own lives.
Our relationships, the stories we tell ourselves.
Powerful stuff. Now, that brings us to the heart of this whole deep dive.
Okay.
Are our friendships helping us grow, or are they holding us back? Are we surrounding ourselves with people who inspire us to be better?
Big questions.
They are. And in part 2, we're going to explore those questions even further, diving into some practical tips from the source on how to build stronger, more fulfilling relationships.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
So stick around. There's a lot more to uncover.
I'm ready. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Raven and Apple's totally unexpected friendship.
It's pretty wild how a story, like meant for kids, can get us thinking about some pretty deep stuff, right?
It is. And this part of the analysis, it really gets into how their friendship challenges those good girl versus rebel labels.
Yeah, it's like everywhere you look, there's that pressure to fit into a certain box,
Right, like you have to pick a side.
Exactly. Whether it's at work, at home, even with our friends, it's like we're supposed to pick a lane and stick to it.
Like the responsible one, the fun one, the quiet one.
Yeah. But Raven and Apple, they show us that people, especially women, are so much more multifaceted than that.
It's not either. It's both hand.
Yes, and that's such a powerful message, not just for personal growth, but for how we view and interact with other people.
Totally. It reminds us that everyone has hidden depths, things we might not see at first glance.
It makes you wonder, how often do we miss out on really connecting with someone because we've already put them in a box in our minds?
It happens all the time. And that's a really great point. It might be one of the biggest takeaways from this whole analysis. Staying open to people, seeing beyond those first impressions.
Instead of judging a book by its cover, actually read a few chapters, right?
Perfect analogy. And speaking of chapters, the analysis uses one of Raven and Apple's biggest fights to illustrate another key point.
Oh, yeah.
How they handle conflict.
That scene where they...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of just throwing out those you always or you never statements, they try to understand each other's perspective.
Which, let's be real, is way harder to do in the heat of the moment.
It is. But that's what John Gottman talks about, that whole idea of constructive conflict.
Remind me.
It can actually strengthen relationships.
So it's not about avoiding arguments altogether.
Nope. It's about how you approach them.
And the source had that tip about I feel statements, right?
Yes. That could be a game changer.
Like instead of you're always late,
I feel stressed when I don't know what time to expect you.
Exactly. It takes the focus off attacking the other person and puts it on how their actions affect you.
Inviting empathy instead of defensiveness.
It's like saying, hey, I'm not trying to pick a fight. I just want you to get where I'm coming from.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective, it actually connects to another idea the analysis brings up.
What's that?
Friendship as a mirror.
How so?
Well, we always talk about how our friends influence us, right?
Yeah.
But we forget that it goes both ways. We influence them too.
Oh, interesting.
It's a two-way street. We see ourselves reflected in the people we're closest to.
So, if you hang out with negative people,
You might start to see the world more negatively yourself. And on the flip side, if you're around positive and supportive people,
things start looking up.
exactly, it makes you think about the energy you're putting out there and the energy you're letting in.
And for Raven and Apple, they help each other see their best selves, right?
Yes. Apple sees Raven's courage and potential, while Raven shows Apple that it's okay to question things, to break free from expectations.
So your friends can actually help you become a better version of yourself.
That's the idea. It's about surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, who challenge you in a good way.
It makes you really evaluate your friendships, doesn't it?
It does. Are your friendships helping you grow, or are they holding you back?
That's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Definitely. And I think at the heart of Raven and Apple's story, it's about encouraging us to be brave, to challenge the status quo, to make our own choices.
Like they say in the story, you have the power to choose your own adventure.
Exactly. But how do we actually do that in real life? How do we translate these fairy tale lessons into something, actionable?
That's a great question. And luckily, this analysis actually has some answers for us.
It does.
It does. In part 3, we're going to dive into some practical tips from the source, tips that can help us all build stronger, more fulfilling friendships,
Okay, I'm all ears.
the kind of friendships that inspire us to be our best selves.
Can't wait.
So stick around. There's a lot more to come in this deep dive. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Raven and Apple's awesome friendship.
It's been quite a journey, right?
It has. We've talked about growth, conflict, those good girl versus rebel stereotypes. But now I'm ready for the how-to.
The practical stuff.
Yeah. How do we take all this amazing stuff and make it work in our own lives, in our own friendships?
Well, the analysis has some great tips, and it all starts with communication.
Makes sense. Raven and Apple, they never shy away from tough conversations, do they?
Nope, not at all. They're honest, even when it's uncomfortable.
And that's something we can all learn from, right?
Absolutely. Instead of bottling things up, letting resentment fester, have those open and honest conversations.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
But remember those I feel statements we talked about? That seems like a good place to start.
Totally. Focusing on your feelings instead of blaming the other person.
Like, I feel frustrated when I don't get to finish my thought instead of, you always interrupt me.
Exactly. It's just the focus creates space for real understanding.
And sometimes those honest conversations might lead to realizing that a friendship needs to, I don't know, maybe change. Or even end.
It's tough, but it happens. Raven and Apple show us that friendships aren't static.
People grow, they change, paths diverge.
Exactly. And it's okay to acknowledge that.
It doesn't mean anyone's a bad person.
Right. It's just part of life. The key is to communicate those changes openly,
Yeah,
honestly.
no. So no more ghosting.
Haha, preferably not. But on the flip side, one of the most beautiful things about Raven and Apple's friendship is their support.
They're each other's biggest fans.
They really are. Cheering each other on, even when the dreams seem, I don't know, a little crazy.
Like when Apple finally comes around to Raven wanting to rewrite her destiny. Or when Raven pushes Apple to question the rules.
It's powerful stuff. Having someone believe in you, encourage you to be your best self.
Like your own personal hype squad.
Uh-huh. Exactly. And it goes both ways. Be that supportive friend for others too. Celebrate their wins, offer encouragement, remind them of their strengths.
We can all lift each other up.
We can. And when conflicts do happen, remember forgiveness.
Because they will happen.
They will. No one's perfect. We all mess up.
And Raven and Apple, they have their share of arguments, but they always find a way back to each other.
It's because they prioritize their connection. Choose forgiveness over holding grudges.
It's not about saying the bad behavior was okay.
It's about choosing to move on, let go of the hurt.
It's like saying, I value our friendship more than I value being right.
That's a great way to put it. And I think the biggest lesson we can learn from them is to embrace our true selves.
The whole package, even the messy parts.
Yes. Because those imperfections, they're what make us interesting, unique.
Like Apple's not just a good girl. Raven's not just a rebel. They're both so much more.
Exactly. And when we embrace that, we attract the kind of friendships that truly matter.
Friendships that challenge us, support us, help us grow.
It's about being your authentic self, ditching the rule book, finding your people.
And being brave enough to rewrite your own story. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Raven and Apple's amazing friendship.
Who knew Ever After High could be so insightful?
Right. It just shows that you can find wisdom in the most unexpected places.
You really can.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time for another adventure in learning.